The prestigious Langford Hotel glittered with chandeliers as guests in designer gowns and tuxedos gathered for a charity banquet. At the far end of the hall, 42-year-old Daniel Hayes quietly adjusted the silverware at one of the tables. His crisp white shirt and black vest marked him as a waiter, one of dozens working the gala that evening. To the wealthy patrons, he was invisible. Just another server refilling glasses, carrying trays, and staying out of the way. But inside Daniel carried a weight that none of them could see. As he polished the last glass, the event organizer's voice cut through the chatter. Ladies and gentlemen, before the auction begins, we'll have a small performance. But our hired singer is running late. She turned, and her eyes landed on Daniel. You look like you can sing a tune. Care to amuse our guests? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Several phones were raised, ready to capture the spectacle of a waiter embarrassing himself before the city's elite. Daniel froze, heat rising to his face. He wanted to refuse, to melt back into the shadows. But then his eyes caught a familiar sight: his teenage daughter, Sophie, working part-time at the coat check across the hall. She looked at him nervously, mouthing, "It's okay, Dad." In that moment, Daniel knew what he had to do. He walked to the small stage, every step heavier than the last. The murmurs grew louder, mocking, expectant. Then silence. Daniel closed his eyes. And when he opened them, he was no longer the waiter in a cheap vest. He was the man he used to be, the aspiring baritone who once dreamed of opera houses before life, and bills forced him to give up music to raise Sophie alone. The first notes left his lips deep, rich, carrying across the room like a wave. Gasps broke the silence. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. This was no parlor trick. This was power. This was heartbreak. This was a man pouring years of sacrifice, love, and silence into a single song. Phones that had been raised to mock now recorded in awe. The crowd leaned forward, their eyes wide, their expressions softened from arrogance to reverence. Even the organizer, who had singled him out, stood speechless, her hand covering her mouth. When Daniel's final note faded, the hall was still. For a moment, no one dared breathe. And then a thunderous applause erupted. People rose to their feet. Some had tears in their eyes. Sophie stood at the back, clapping with everything she had, her face glowing with pride. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to smile. Later that evening, one of the city's most renowned music directors approached him. "Where have you been hiding?" he asked, his voice still tinged with disbelief. Daniel shook his head. "Taking care of my daughter. That's all that mattered." The director placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've given enough. It's time the world heard you again." Months later, Daniel wasn't just setting tables in the Langford Hotel. He was performing on stages, with Sophie in the front row, always smiling, always cheering. He had been invisible to the world. But one night, one song changed everything. Because sometimes the greatest talent is hidden in plain sight. And sometimes, all it takes is one chance to remind the world who you truly are.